So last time we spent quite a lot of time kind of going over this credit card statement, and so just to kind of quickly recap, the important parts about the statement is to understand your balance. Right, every month your balance should change because you're making payments. So right there where it says new balance, that should update. Right, whether you are making payments or if you are spending more on that credit card, the balance will obviously adjust. um, Understand also that your credit limit is set, so you can't go beyond the credit limit. So you can't make $10,000 worth of purchases on the credit card because you're limited to just 5,000. The minimum payment is a recommendation. Well, yeah, it's a recommendation and also a requirement. Right, you have to send at least 48.39, but you can send more. It's recommended that you send more so that you don't pay interest over the lifetime of the credit card loan. Okay. All right. So today we're gonna look at it and broken down into smaller components so that you get an idea of what percentage of interest you're paying each month, as well as a couple other factors, so that you get an idea of how credit card debt can accumulate if you're not careful with your payments. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the questions. Oh, looks like we got somebody. Hey, look who it is. What's up, Lewis? I don't know if you heard me. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the think about the situation questions. Um, as on behalf of the credit card statement, right? So first of all, it's asking, what do you find striking or surprising about her credit card bill? Um, just in general, what stands out to you guys? What do you find surprising about a credit card statement in general? Feel free to jump in at any point. So I think maybe the one thing that I would find striking on here is that they give you so much information, but at the same time, they're not telling you what interest rate they're charging you, right? They tell you that on the late payment warning that the APR could be increased to the penalty of 27.24, but that's only if you make a late payment, right? They're not telling you right now what percentage of interest you're paying. And that's the sketchy part of credit card companies, is that they don't tell you that up front. Um, because it just depends on where the market is at. So if interest rates are high, typically credit card rates will be higher. If interest rates are low, credit card rates will be lower. But they don't tell you necessarily like this is the interest that you're paying on this amount. Um, Unless of course you have one of those promotional cards where they tell you no percent interest for the first 12 months, right? Then you know for sure you're not paying any interest for 12 months. Let's see something on the chat. Um, are you seeing? Is everybody else seeing just a black screen? Let me try to stop the share and share one more time. What about now, Lewis? Okay, cool, cool. Okay, so again, we're just kind of walking through these questions, and so that's the surprising thing. It would be nice to know, okay, what is the interest rate that I'm paying at this particular time or for this particular month? It would be nice, right? Because then it gives you a better idea of like, well, if this interest rate is climbing really high, I need to hurry up and finish making these payments for this balance so that I don't continue to pay this high interest. So sometimes you just get a bill, and sometimes it could be a surprise. It's happened to me for sure. Sometimes where I've had a credit card bill that I kind of have planned to pay off in a certain amount of months, But then one month I just get like this really big jump. Maybe the month before the interest charge was only maybe like $10, and then the next month it jumps up to like 35. And so you're just like, whoa, like why such a big jump? And so it might not seem like it, but from $10 paying an interest to 35 the next month, it kind of makes you like, oh, like, okay, I'm gonna pay this off quick because I don't want to be paying interest. So that's the one thing that I find surprising, because so much information, and yet that's the one thing that is not included. All right. And so again, that's kind of done on purpose on behalf of the credit card companies to kind of lure you into a false sense of security of like, okay, my interest won't be getting that much larger, but sometimes it does, it'll jump. All right. So let's take a look at part B here. So B is asking now to take a look at the minimum payment, right? So the minimum payment each month is usually a percentage of the new balance. Okay, so your minimum payment, right? It's a small fraction of the balance, and it asks that, let's see, the percentage varies from one credit card to another, which is true. What is the percentage for Natalie's credit card, right? So we're looking here strictly at what is the minimum payment in comparison to the entire new balance, right? What percentage of that is it? So it gives you an idea of how small that payment is in comparison to how much you owe, right? So if you wanted to set up a a a figure or a percentage, you could set this up as a ratio. So for part B, if we want to know the percentage of her minimum payment compared to her new balance, we can set it up as 4839 all over 1935 with 72 cents. Right? And then this will give us a decimal, which we then convert into a percentage. So let me share my whole screen so you guys can see my calculator here. All right, so 4839 divided by 1935 with 72 cents. Okay, what we're looking at here is a 0.0249. So it's a pretty small decimal. And if we were to convert that to a percentage, right, we're looking at 2.49%. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that the minimum payment here is only about 2.5% of what you owe each month. So sometimes what'll happen over time is that at the beginning you have a small minimum payment, but then as the time goes by, the minimum payment starts to grow. So sometimes it makes it difficult if you leave your balance right too big for too long. What happens is like, okay, your minimum payment is maybe $48 right now, but a year from now that minimum payment might go up to maybe like $70. And if you're tight on money, then you're gonna have a hard time making that minimum payment. So again, it's part of the strategies used by the credit card companies to kind of lock you in into paying more interest over a longer period of time. Okay, so at the moment it's only about 2.5%, and then it depends on the credit card, right? So depending on the credit card, sometimes the minimum balance might be 3%, 4%, 5% of the entire balance. Okay, all right, any questions on that so far? Okay, all right, let's take a look at C. So C, I like this question because it does give you an idea of how much interest you're paying per month. Sometimes I wonder that myself. So then I like to do this on my own statements and try to see like, okay, what's the percentage that I'm paying, making sure that it is adding up to the APR that they gave me for that year. Okay, so the Natalie's credit card account has a finance charge with an APR of 17.2%, compounded monthly on the unpaid balance. Okay, so let's talk about what that means. It means that she's going to get charged. Remember, APR is annual percentage rate. So this is an annual rate. It's not that she's getting charged 17.2% every month. It's over the course of 12 months, they're going to collect 17.2% on top of the balance. All right. So 17% of 1,900, whatever that amount happens to be. However, they're going to break that up over the 12 months because that's what they're compounding it by, right? They're compounding monthly. Okay, so that interest, you break it up over the 12 months, and then that tells you how much interest how much percent of interest you're paying in 1 month. Okay, so what is the monthly interest rate that she pays? Well, in order to find that out, you could take the 17.2, and because this is the APR and it's compounded monthly, you could divide this by 12, right? So you're going to break up that percentage over the course of a year, each month, so 12 times. And this will give you an idea of what the percentage is each month. So 17.2 divided by 12. Whoa, 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 that's not right. Okay. Okay, so 1.43 percent. Okay, the reason why that jumps right into a percent is because I took 17.2 as a percent and then I divided by 12. I didn't take 17.2 then convert it to a decimal. I didn't want to do that. So what I have now is the true percentage. I don't have to move the decimal over. Okay, so she pays 1.43% monthly. Right, so it doesn't seem like much, right? You're only paying 1.43% of interest, and it makes you feel like, okay, that's not too bad. I can live with that, right? It's not like I'm paying 8% a month or 10% a month. Okay, so because she's currently at 17.2% over the course of a year, right? This is the pre-penalty, right? So if you're making your payments on time, the credit card companies typically keep your interest rate at what it is. However, if you were to, let's say, make one late payment, they could increase that percentage from 17.2 up to 27.24, right? So just to kind of compare how your interest rate could increase once you make a late payment and you get thrown into the penalty, imagine now taking 27.24% and dividing this by 12, right? And you'll see how then that's going to affect your monthly interest rate. Okay. It's going to jump up to 2.27 per month. And again, this is if you make a late payment and then you get thrown into the penalty APR. Okay. But if you think about paying, right, imagine, right, like we've seen all of these examples previously on how much interest the banks will pay you when you put money into their accounts, right? Investing, right? You put your money into their accounts. We never saw APRs in the teens, 17.2% that you could earn, right? That was like didn't show up on one example. The largest example percentage we saw was maybe like 4%, 5%, right? So think of the trade-off. And this is how banks make their money, right? You put money into their accounts, right? And they can compound over a course of a year or whatever, and they might pay you about 4%, right? Versus if you borrow money from them, look at what they're charging you. They're charging you 17% on whatever you bought, right? And so that's how they make their money. Why? Because they have the flexibility to loan money out. Right? You don't have that option, right? Most people don't have that option to like loan a bunch of money out to people and say, okay, here's some money, but because you're borrowing it from me, you're gonna pay me back with interest. I want 10% interest back. You know what I mean? Like most people don't have that option because they need their money now. Like they can't afford to let somebody else borrow it, much less let somebody else borrow it and then run the risk of them never paying you back. Right? So the banks have a way to control that because if you don't make payments back to the credit card company, they can charge you fees. They can increase your APR. Your credit score goes down, which then makes it really difficult to apply and get other credit cards. It makes it really difficult to buy a car, to buy a home. sometimes when you apply to a job, they look you up and they find your credit score, and the credit score gives an indicator on basically like how responsible you are. People with lower credit scores tend to be classified as less responsible, so maybe they might not be given that job. So there is like a backlog of effects that happen if you have if you don't make payments, right? Sometimes you want to apply to get an apartment. They'll run your credit, because they want to see, like, does this person make monthly payments on time, right? If you're somebody who's going to rent out your apartment, you don't want to like rent it out to somebody who's not responsible with making payments, right? So that's how they get you. Right now, imagine that's just you, and you might not be a person that spends a lot of money on credit cards, but then they give out credit card applications to millions of people, right? So they're collecting $30 from this person, $30 from that person, 25 from this person, 18 from that person, right? And at the end of a month, right, all of the money that they collected on interest for literally doing nothing, right? They just let you borrow money. They didn't work for it, right? They didn't actually spend time, like, but they just ran a small risk, right? The small risk that that person could or could not have made that payment. Okay, but think about it, right? That's the drawback, right? 17% is what you're paying in a year if you choose not to pay it all off at once. That's what you'll pay. Okay, and that's on a good day. All right, some people have larger percentages depending on their credit score. Okay, all right. So that kind of talks about the advantages and disadvantages of credit cards. You can buy what you want at the moment, but if you take too long to pay it off, you're gonna pay much more than the value of that thing, right? You want to buy a computer that costs $1,000. You take too long to pay it off, you might end up paying close to $1,500 or $1,600, right? So knowing how to use your credit cards, to get what you want, but then also being smart about paying them back quickly so you're not paying way more than what it was worth. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and now move on to number 1. Okay. Are there any questions about the first part, right? The think about the situation. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So let's take a look at a situation then of a person that um, they make some charges on a credit card, right? They spend $1,500 on that credit card, but then this person loses his or her job, right? So, right, pretty relatable, right? Let's say that that could be anybody right now. Um, so they bought some things that they needed, they put it on a credit card, but then they lose their job, right? And now they can't make the monthly payments because most times if you're going to make payments on things, you're going to prioritize rent, groceries, gas, utilities, right? And then if you have left over, you're going to try to like send the money to the credit cards. But if you don't make money to the credit cards, it's not like you're going to starve, right? So you got to make those decisions in terms of like, what is the most important? And then whatever I can't pay, then I'm just going to have to like deal with that later. Okay. All right. So this person has $1,500 in debt. They can't make monthly payments. All right. So if the credit card company charge interest at an APR of 18%, okay, so again, APR is annual percentage rate of 18% compounded monthly, what will be the outstanding balance without any late payment fees? Okay, so this person right now, they want to know what's going to happen to their balance, right? Based off of the APR that is currently there, what's going to happen to their balance if no late payment fees are attached to their balance, right? Because most times you do get a late payment fee, but let's say for this case, the company is going to waive those late payment fees. All right. So what is the person's account going to look after 1 month, 2 months, and then 3 months? All right. So what we want to do here is first, because we're talking about this in months, we can't use 18% because that represents the whole year. And then since it's compounding, we can't just say like, okay, we're going to add this much, because every month is going to be a little bit different amount based on how much of the balance there is. So let's kind of start by finding out what is the monthly percentage rate, okay? So that 18%, we're gonna divide that by 12 so that we can find out what is the interest being charged each month, okay? So we can go ahead, let's go ahead and highlight this part here, right? This is what we need. APR, right? That's the annual percentage rate. And we're gonna go ahead and divide that by 12. So for part A, we have 18% divided by 12. I believe this is 1.5. Yeah, so that's gonna be 1.5% monthly, right? That's the interest being charged on the existing balance. Okay, so then what is the balance going to be on this person's account after 1 month? Okay, so if initially it starts off at 15, so now for part one, if initially you're owing $1,500 and they're going to charge you 1.5% in interest, then here's how this is going to look. The balance is going to stay at 1,500 and then it's going to add on the 1.5% of interest. So then how do we control to make sure that we keep it at 1,500 and we add to it? You want to use 1 plus, right? 1 plus, because there you can, if you were to distribute, you have 1,500 times 1, you keep it at 1,500, and then you add whatever interest comes from the 1.5%. So it's 1.5% of 1,500. So then in this case, we want to convert this to a decimal. So turn this into 0.015. So what we're looking at here is 1,500 is what you owe. After the first month, here's how you could calculate what your new balance is going to be. You multiply it times 1.015. And if we do that, ah, 1,500 times 1.015. Now you have a balance of 1522 with 50 cents. Okay, so you bought the thing for $1,500, but then you didn't make a payment for that first month. So then they charged you interest, right? The monthly interest that you're going to have to pay. In this case, now your balance has grown from 1,500 to 1,522 with 50 cents. So there was an increase of $22.50 that now you owe, because that's the interest that got charged, right? So again, maybe it doesn't seem like much, but now you're already paying more than what you paid for the items, okay? So that's just after 1 month, okay? Let's talk about now after 2 months. If now we're looking at this for 2 months, okay, let's say you still haven't made a payment. So the balance went up. Now your balance is 1522 with 50 cents. And then another month goes by where you don't make any payments, right? So the balance hasn't gone down, but now they're going to charge you interest on this new balance, right? And since your new balance is 1522.5, now you're going to have to pay 1.5% of that balance, not 1.5% of 1,500, okay? This is where the compounding works against you versus in your favor, right? When it works against you, it's much harder to make these payments go down with the balances, because the balance goes up and then they charge you interest on the bigger balance, which makes it go even higher, and then percent on the bigger balance, and then higher and higher and higher. So this is how it can escalate to kind of get out of control for certain people. So again, same calculation, because it's still 1.5% monthly. So because you want to maintain the balance and you want to add to it, right? It's still 1 plus. So then you're going to end up here multiplying by 1.015. And then now you have a product, 1522.50 times 1.015. Okay, now your balance has gone up to 1545, right? They've added another additional amount to it, 1545 with, let's say, 34 cents. Okay, so now from previous month to this month, right? Now your balance has grown by, let's see what the difference is here. 1545.34 minus 1522.5. No, that's not what I want. And this month, your balance grew by $22.84. Okay, so you see it's grown by a slightly larger amount, by 34 cents. Okay, because you had a larger balance that they took 1.5% of. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit more, right? And so now, right now you're going into your third month. Maybe you still haven't found any luck getting a job yet, or even if you did find one, maybe you haven't gotten paid. So you're still not making any payments to this credit card. And so now the new balance that's in your account is the 1545 with 34 cents, right? And again, they're going to charge you 1.5% monthly. You want to maintain that balance. It's going to maintain the balance and they're going to add to that. So that's why we use 1 plus 0.015, which is 1.015. And now when you find the product of those two things, now your balance is at 1568 with 52 cents. Okay. So how much did it grow? How much did your balance grow? How much do you owe more now? Well, let's find the difference. This month it grew by $23.18. Okay. But this growth isn't good for you because this is not money that's going to be in your account as cash. This is money that now you owe, right? So this is the danger of credit cards when you don't make payments. And even when you do make payments, it's still growing by a certain amount. Okay. They're charging you interest on whatever is left in the account. But typically when you make payments, you shrink the balance. So you are paying interest, but it's not as much. Okay. So any questions on that, right? The setup for the math seems pretty easy. It's mostly like the real life ramifications of that. Are there any questions on it? All right. We're okay so far then? Cool. Okay. All right. So then recursively, it's asking, right, what recursive formula shows how to calculate the credit card balance from one month to the next? Okay. Well, pretty much each month, what you would do is just multiply it by 1.015, right? You would take the previous balance, multiply it by 1.015, and you get the new balance, right? So essentially, writing a recursive formula for this is not too difficult because if you want to know what your balance will be next month, okay, if you want to know what will be your balance for next month, right, we can leave that as next. Okay. If I want to know what I'm going to get for next month, I would take my balance now. Okay, so I'll take my now balance. And all you would do to it each month is simply multiply by 1.015. Okay, that's your growth rate. So you take the balance that you have now, you multiply by 1.015, and then it'll tell you what your balance will be for next month, right? The next month's balance. Okay. So that's pretty much it for a recursive. That's all you have to do. But you would have to keep doing it, right? You can't get the next month until you know the month you have now. but that's what recursive formulas are, right? You have to know what you have now in order to be able to get next, um, and you can't get next unless you have now, right? So they it kind of traps you into something, right? You can't really, it's not like a future value formula where you can plug in everything and then you get the output. Recursive is like, here's what I have now, that will help me get to what I have next, and then next, and then next, and then next. So it's like a ladder, right? You got to take it step by step. Okay. All right, so for part C now, it's asking us to find out what formula shows how to calculate the credit card balance after X monthly billing cycles. Okay, now this one here is kind of like our future values formula, right? It's not recursive. This one is asking us like, based on how many months, right? After X number of months, I can try to find out what my balance will be, right? So let's say I choose not to make payments for like 6 months, like rather than doing this 6 different times, maybe I can create a formula that shows us exactly what we'll get after 6 months of no payments, right? What will be my balance, all right? So for part C here, okay, so we're gonna wanna use something similar to the compound interest formula, okay? Um, so because it's X is represented in months, not years, it's gonna be slightly different, okay? So let's consider this to be, we'll call this B of X, okay? B of X, B for balance, right? B for balance. And X is the number of months, okay? So our variable, we can plug in number of months in which we haven't made payments. All right, so think of the future value formula, the regular one for compound interest. The compound interest formula was F is equal to A times 1 plus the rate over the number of compounding events to the N times T. Okay, so we're gonna have something similar to this. It's just that we won't have T because we're not gonna go in terms of years. We're just gonna stick to months. All right, so my balance here is going to equal, similar to the compound interest formula, in terms that I have to start with an initial amount, right? My initial in this case is how much I have, my initial balance, instead of my initial investment. So, but it works similar, right? It's initial investment, initial balance. So my initial balance was 1,500. Okay. I have 1 plus. Here my rate was, this is the yearly rate, right? My yearly rate was 18%, right? So I'm going to turn this into a decimal. So 18% just becomes 0.18. And then I have N, right? This is the number of compounding periods. Well, since the APR is going to be compounded monthly, then I can go ahead and divide that interest by 12. Okay, so you see how this is something similar to what we've already done. 0.18 divided by 12 was a calculation that we already did, right? We did it without turning this into a decimal, but it gave us the percentage that we would be paying monthly. This is the same thing, but now as a decimal, okay? Now, the only other thing is, well, I am not going to look to do this for several years, right? It's not several years that I'm hoping to do this. In fact, I'm not even going to want to do it for 12 months. I want to leave that open. I want to see what this will be after just X number of months. It could be 1 month, it could be 2 months. So where this formula now changes is that instead of using N or T, this is where we utilize X. X is the variable, right? X tells us how many times we're going to have to make this multiplication product happen. Because every time I multiplied it by 1.015, it generated a new balance, right? So if I multiplied the way that we did it above, we did it 3 different times. Imagine that X would be 3, right? The formula here would take care of this for us. Let us know that if you did 3 months without payments, rather than doing it recursively, you would be able to find out how much you owe by using the formula that we've written for C, okay? All right, so now let's clean this up a little bit because we know that we can simplify these values. I could then say that my balance, okay, with my variable of X here is going to equal to 1,500 times, well, 0.18 divided by 12 is 0.015. And then we're going to add 1 to that. So we end up with 1.015, right? Which is the essentially the growth rate of our balance, right? 1.015. That's what we've been multiplying by. And then we have the power of x here, right? And then that's it, right? That's our formula that would tell us this is how much you're going to owe if you continue to miss payments, right? This is how much you'll owe after X number of months, okay? All right, so now we can use this because C was simply to write the formula. Part D is what will the balance on the credit card account if no payments are made for an entire year, right? So we know how much we're going to owe after 3 months, but rather than having to do that 9 more times to see what we owe at the end of the year, now we have a formula, we can plug it in, right? So remember, X represents number of months. So we can't use years, right? We can't say X is 1 for 1 year. We'd have to say X is 12, right? So X is number of months if we want to know a full year. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So in this case, since we want for part D, right, no payments for 1 year, which is the same as no payments for 12 months. Okay, we can go ahead and plug it in. So now B of 12, so my balance after 12 months will be 1,500 times 1.015 to the 12th power. All right. And let's see what your new balance is. So you'll have 1,500, wait. Don't like this calculator. Okay. All right, so let's start with 1.015. That's going to be taken to the 12th power. Okay. And then this, now we multiply times the 1,500. So 1 year of no payments, you are going to end up with a balance of 1,793 with 43 cents. Right? So you bought $1,500 worth of equipment, but if you're not making payments, now you owe, sorry, my hair is like super fluffy this morning. Now you owe a lot more, right? $293 more than what you originally paid for. And all of that extra money is interest that you're paying, right? That's not new product that you get to buy $293 worth of. You're just paying the bank $293. That's what you'll owe now if you don't make payments, okay, for a full year. So, right, what does that really mean, right? Like, so how much interest are you really paying? Because now you have a balance of 1793 when you were told you were going to have an APR of 18%. So let's see if that's actually true. Because remember, when you compare APR with APY, APY always tends to be a little bit bigger. It tells you how much the true annual percentage was versus what the rate said it would be, okay? So that's what part E is asking now. It says, what is the effective annual interest rate, right? The APY, the annual percentage yield under this scenario. Well, basically, here's how you find it. Make the difference, find the difference between what you owe currently, which is $17.93 and 43 cents, compared to what your initial was, right? So we know that if we make this subtraction, this is going to be 293 with 43 cents. And we want to know, this is how much more I owe compared to what I started. So what percentage is that? Well, I have to compare it to the original amount, right? The ratio to the original amount, which is 1,500. So when you find this ratio, remember APR was 18%. So that's what they were going to calculate kind of like future-wise. APY is going to tell you the true percentage of what you really paid over the course of that year. So 293.43 all over 1,500 tells you that you are actually paying a higher interest rate of 19.56. Okay, so this decimal is 1956. So you have an APY is equal to 19.56%. Okay. And why does it change? Why is it that you end up paying more as an annual percentage yield versus the APR? That's because of the compounding effect. You are paying a little bit more each month because the balance keeps getting bigger, and then they take percentage of that. Then it gets bigger, a percentage of the bigger amount. Then it gets bigger, percentage of the bigger amount. And it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going until the point that you have like exceeded what the APR was, and you're actually paying 19.56% on interest. Okay. Questions? It's kind of scary, huh? I mean, it is if you don't, manage it responsibly. How we doing, guys? Talk to me. We okay? Good. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look briefly at number 2, because number 2 simply then makes the adjustment to this based off of if late fees were to apply. Okay. So it's asking, right, how would your answers to problem 1, right, which we just did, how would the part A through C be different if, in addition, the credit card company was also charging the late fee, right? So this is like the scenario. This scenario is pretty bad, right? You're not making any payments for a year. The balance that you had of 1,500 now has kind of shot up to 1,793. You haven't made any payments. Luckily, your interest rate hasn't gone up. The interest rate had stayed the same, and they also haven't been charging you late fees. Okay. Not likely for that to be realistic, because the moment you make the first late payment, you get the late fee, and most likely you're going to get the penalty APR, right? So whatever you think the calculations are, it's actually going to be worse. This is like the best case scenario for number 1. Number 2, a little bit more realistic, but how does that then look in terms of mathematically, right? How is that going to be a little bit different? So essentially what happens is, let's say that for part A, we know that the percentage monthly is 1.5%. If we wanted to know what the late payment balance would be after 1 month, after 2 months, and then after 3 months, the calculation is somewhat similar. You have the initial amount, which is 1,500, which you're multiplying times 1.015. However, right, that would only tell you what the balance is based on the percentage of APR that you owe, the interest. But now they're also going to charge you a $35 late fee each month. Okay, so not only is it that your balance went up because of the interest, but then you get added another $35 on top of that for paying things late. So then what happens is now you get this additional charge plus 35, right? And this is the late fee, right? LF. Okay, so what is this balance going to look like now? So you have your 1,500 times 1.015. Okay, it was the 1,522 with 50 cents. That's what we got in part 1, but now we have to add $35 to that. So now it's 1,557 with 50 cents. Okay, so that's your new balance. And then next month, you don't plan on making payments. So now that becomes your new balance, 1,557 with 50 cents. You're gonna have to your balance will go up because of the interest rate the natural part here of 1.015. But then again, no payment, right? So they're going to charge another late fee, right? It's not just a one-time late fee, it's a late fee for every missed payment, okay? So another $35 gets added on. All right, so let's see then what the damage would be. 1557.5 times 1.015. Okay, you're up to 1580 without even the penalty having been in place, and now another $35. You're up to 1615 with 86 cents. All right, and now let's take a look at the third month. Right, so now your starting balance for the third month is 1615. Sorry, I should do this in red. 1615 with 86 cents. This you will have to pay the penalty of, I'm sorry, not the penalty. This is the interest rate that'll get added on, and then another $35 for a late fee. So 1615.86 times 1.015 plus $35. You're up to 1675 with 10 cents. Okay, so the late fees start to add up in just 3 months. If you take a look at scenario one, problem number one, your interest was adding up. It had you at 1568, right? It was only $68 of an increase. Versus once the late penalties start kicking in, you've gone from $1,500 to $1,675 in 3 months. Right, it's $175 more that you're paying on fees and interest. So even if, let's say, you're still making, $80 a month towards the payments, you're not making a dent quick enough because the fees are adding up and the interest rate is adding up as well. Okay. All right. So I think I'll stop it here today. That kind of gives us an idea of an intro. There's a couple more questions that are similar, and we'll look at those next time. So it's a little bit of the write a recursive formula, write a final value formula, that kind of thing. And then we'll take a look at the rest of the problems sometime next week. Okay. All right. So are we good? Do we feel okay on some of this, on understanding the process of credit cards a little bit better? Honestly, that's my goal, right? It's just to make sure that you guys understand how this works so that you don't get caught into these like credit card spirals and you end up having financial challenges. What's up, man?
I have a question.
Yeah, man.
So I understand it, but I just have like I was just wondering, what if you give a payment towards your balance,
Mm-hmm.
but like it's not the minimum? Is it still considered late or?
If you pay it late, then yeah, it's late. But if so,
No,
what do you
like
mean?
I mean, like if you pay on time, but you just don't give the minimum, like you give less than the minimum.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Then I think, oh, you know what? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think that they will still charge you a late fee because they won't consider it a payment. They won't consider it a full payment because you didn't pay the minimum. So
Oh, okay.
it'll bring your balance down a little bit. So let's say right, like let's say you only paid $30 to this. The minimum payment is 48. So then they're not going to consider having received a full payment. So then it's almost like you never made a payment. So they're going to charge you a late fee for that month, but your balance will go down a little bit.
All right.
Now, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's most likely what they'll do. They'll still penalize you for not making the minimum payment. All right. Anything else? Curiosities?